We're joined by Rishi Sunak supporter and indeed former Health Secretary and MP Matt Hancock. Good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Good to be speaking with you. The Chancellor in the Times this morning highlights a national emergency made up of, well, several crises actually. The economy, the NHS, illegal migration are among those crises. How much responsibility do you accept for the national emergency in the NHS that Rishi Sunak says we now find ourselves in?
Well, the challenge, especially with waiting lists, is obviously down to the COVID pandemic. And one of the commitments that Rishi's making, which I'm a massive supporter of, is to get rid of the 1 year waits in the NHS. We'd nearly done that before the pandemic. We got them down to just over 1,000, but obviously the pandemic, blew that out of the water. And there's now this huge challenge of the backlog. And what I like about Rishi's plan is that firstly, he's proposing to the honesty on it, an audit of all the people who are on that waiting list and make sure that we know exactly who needs treatment, the commitment to get those 1 year waits under control by September 2024. I like that plan. I like the fact that Rishi's backing the NHS. He comes from an NHS background, of course. And it's another reason to vote for Rishi.
He wants to solve it as well, this crisis in the NHS, with apparently with new targets and a task force, which hardly feels like a revolution. The NHS Confederation is warning that vacancies could grow to around 180,000 in the next 2 years. So in terms of placing us on a crisis footing and crisis intervention, I mean, it doesn't blow us all away, does it?
No, on the contrary, if you want to solve a problem like this, we need to learn from things that have worked in the past. And the vaccines task force, which is the model for how to solve this, was incredibly effective. It had, of course, the financial backing, which is important and which is there in the NHS. Obviously, you need the technology. One of the reasons the vaccine rollout was so effective, and I don't know how long you waited for your appointment for your vaccine, but probably 15 minutes or less. It was one of the most efficient things that the NHS has ever done. And that's because the third part, which is getting the technology and the data underpinnings right. Okay, so we invited people at the right moment to come forward for their vaccination, in the same way that you can. Part of Rishi's plan is to change the way we do diagnostics and tests so that you have them all at once rather than one at a time. And you're invited to your surgery at a time that works for you. The NHS is probably the last place in of all the things that you do where you're invited by letter and you're told a specific time. Whenever you book anything else in life, even on much less important things like a restaurant booking, you do that online and you pick a time that works for both you and them. Why can't we have that sort of technology in the NHS? There's no reason not to. And when I was Health Secretary, Rishi always backed me, especially on modernisation, the technology. And so this plan is learning from the best bits of how we've improved the NHS in the past to tackle the big challenges that it faces as we come out of COVID.
Do you think you'd be the best Health Secretary to see these changes through?
I don't know. It's not a conversation I've had, but I do like the plan. That's what that's what I'm backing, that's it's kind of you to ask, but that isn't what this is about. I haven't had any conversation with Rishi about that sort of thing.
Maybe you've not had a conversation, but do you have a personal feeling in and of yourself that actually, if you were reinstated as Health Secretary, that you could deliver this task force and get rid of that 1 year wait and all the things you just mentioned? Would it be you?
Well, look, I don't think that's going to happen. What I do think is what I hope is going to happen is Rishi will be able to put this into place because, whilst this leadership debate has been about lots of things, it's really important that tackling the problems in the NHS and delivering on the NHS is at the heart of them. One of the reasons I'm backing Rishi is because he's got a credible economic plan, but he's got a plan on the NHS. He comes from an NHS background. And we know that in order to govern the country effectively and to win an election and win over swing voters, you need to have a plan to deliver on the NHS, which is usually top of voters' lists of concern, of course, alongside the cost of living at the moment. So, it's all part, Rishi is clearly the candidate out of the two who can most easily win an election and is best placed to beat Keir Starmer, and what would end up being a Starmer-Sturgeon kind of deal of some sort, because we know that Labour can't win the next election on their own. I think that is incredibly important in the national interest, and it's another reason to back Rishi Sunak.
I mean, one could argue, Mr. Hancock, that the Conservatives are actually at this point making it remarkably easy for Labour in terms of electoral chances. This choice is between Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. Surely this means that Sir Keir Starmer, we were just hearing from Nick Thomas-Symonds, that actually Sir Keir Starmer will walk all over them. He's already taken one lawbreaker out of number 10, so surely he's on track to maintain his 100% prosecutorial record on this and take another one out if law-breaking Rishi Sunak should win.
I don't think anybody credits Keir Starmer with Boris Johnson's removal. There's a lot of reasons that Boris had to go, but Keir Starmer was not one of them. Look, Keir Starmer clearly hasn't set the world on fire. The public are not particularly attracted to him. The worst part of the Labour proposal is, as they themselves have admitted, they can't win the next election on their own. They could only, therefore, form a government with some kind of deal. They've ruled out a formal coalition, but they'd have to have some kind of a deal with the SNP. That means Sturgeon pulling the strings. It risks tearing our country apart. It is very, very strongly in the national interest that does not happen. The person best placed to do that and prevent that from happening is Rishi Sunak. And on the positive side, what I'd say actually is I found that this contest, starting with 11 candidates, has been a big battle of ideas. Of course, there's been, debates about style and personality as well, but it's also a battle of ideas. And I think that the Rishi's platform of being honest about the challenges that the country faces and having credible plans to fix them. He's setting out today in the Times the 5 big challenges the country faces that he will hit on day one. The NHS is one of those 5. I agree with that, and that's why I'm supporting his plan on the NHS in particular. But he has a credible plan to get the country through tough times, and he's not just saying what people might want him to say, might want to hear. He's telling, he's being honest with people. I think that is exactly what we need now, and I think it's what can then help us to win the next election against a combination of Labour and the SNP.
Well, just a couple more thoughts from you, if I may, Mr. Hancock. And it is worth noting that Keir Starmer has made clear there will be no deals with the SNP when it comes to...
But he said that, but he can't win the election on his own. He might, he can say all he likes, but since he's also
Do you not trust him? Is he not telling the truth?
Well, I'll tell you what is the truth. The truth is that the Labour Party cannot get a majority in the House of Commons. Figures like Peter Mandelson have admitted that in terms. And that means that in order to be able to govern, Starmer would have to have the consent of the SNP. So I know that he's ruled out a formal deal, but some arrangement would have to be come to. That's just a fact of how the Constitution works in the UK, given that he can't win a majority. All of that means that the only alternative to a Conservative majority government is the SNP pulling the strings, and I don't want to see that happen.
Tim Montgomery, who's a former aide to Boris Johnson, says he's been told by sources close to the Prime Minister that he, Boris Johnson, is convinced that he, Boris Johnson, will be back. Are you convinced by that?
I've got absolutely no idea. Boris did some very big, very positive things, like breaking the deadlock on Brexit, however you voted.
Breaking the law on COVID.
Delivering with me the vaccination program, which got us out of the pandemic first of any major country, the first ever vaccination, and then uniting the West against Putin. I think that those 3 big things will always stand as a testament to what Boris Johnson did as Prime Minister. Of course, there's everything else, and there'll always be a debate about that. But frankly, the country at the moment, faces a choice, and we face a choice in the Conservative Party as to who we want to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, and therefore Prime Minister. And that's what this debate's all about.
So do you think Boris Johnson will be back?
I've got absolutely no idea.
What do you think? What do you think? We don't know for certain either way. But what's your feeling? You know him. You work so closely with him. You must have an inkling as to how his mentality sets him up for perhaps a triumphant return to number 10 at some point.
I've got absolutely no idea. I'm being honest.
I appreciate your honesty.
Completely honest with you. It's not often that a politician says, "I just don't know."
Do you want to see him back? Would you like to see him back? Not is he going to go or not, come back or not? But would you like to see him back?
Okay, I just don't think that. I don't think that is a prospect. I just don't. Okay. I think that I think we've got two excellent candidates for the future, and and that's it.
And that's it. Well, we'll play this to you in 18 months' time, Mr. Hancock, and we'll see what you say then. How about that? Thank you very much indeed for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. That is Matt Hancock, who, as you've heard, is supporting Rishi Sunak to be the next Conservative leader and indeed Prime Minister.